Welcome to From Doubt to Destiny,
the podcast where dreams come alive. I'm Eden Ryder, the Dream Maker.
And I'm Stacie Trott, the Queen Maker. We're here to give your dreams the royal treatment that they deserve. Get ready to unlock your queen
and unleash her dreams. For those of you who are regular listeners, you may be surprised to hear my voice right now. This is Eden Ryder, and I'm with my co-host,
Stacie Trott.
And we are switching things up today. We recently did a couple of podcast episodes on marriage, and we realized ourselves, and then also through some others telling us, that we kind of dove into a lot about my marriage, and we didn't really get into Stacie's marriage, and particularly her story around her marriage, which she has a pretty, I would say, interesting story. It's not as well, aspects of it are common, but as she's mentioned, she's been married twice, but to the same person, so not everyone can say they have experienced that. And then additionally, I think knowing you, and anyone who does know you, I think it's fair to say you're very passionate about marriage and speaking into other women about their marriage, and just especially those who've had probably challenges specifically in their marriage. So very excited to kind of switch things up and kind of more play where Stacie tends to ask a lot more questions, and I feel like a lot of times it's more almost me being interviewed, which working on getting more of a discussion going back and forth, but it's gonna be fun to switch it up today, and I'm going to be asking Stacie some questions. So for those of you who are new to listen, every conversation we typically have like a topic, there's a tension around it, transformation, and then takeaways. Those may blur a little bit today just with us switching up how we're doing things today. However, they'll still be in there hopefully as we unravel this story. So welcome, and Stacie, let's start.
We also just mentioned that we have a special guest in case.
Oh, we probably should.
Oohing and eyeing in the background.
So I have my 1-month-old son here, Bomani. So he's off camera nursing, and if you just hear any random little noises, or if I have to take a little pause, we're just adjusting over here, doing all the things. So interesting. I feel like I know a good amount of your story, of your marriage story. Like, obviously, most people know, like, we're friends. My husband has been friends with you guys even longer, so I know a lot of the story. But I think I just know the story that most people would know, even whether they, like, intimately know you or not. So I think this will be interesting as well for me today, and I might be learning some things that I also didn't know. So I guess to start, how did you and George, your husband, meet?
Great question. And I find this true for every couple that I've met to date, and that's like all around the world, that each couple that we've had the pleasure of asking this question of, they have slight varying differences to the story of how they met. Like always, one's interrupting the other, going, well, that part's not how that happens. And so I think it's funny, and I think it's like this quirky nuance of how there's always like 3 sides to every story: yours, the other person's, and then some combination of both is the actual story. And I think it's a great reason why eyewitness testimony should not be allowed, because we don't know if we're really remembering it exactly right. But we met, I like to say 3 times before we actually exchanged information. So I was, oh my God, so many years ago, 2002. We're both native New Yorkers, went to an NBA All-Star game weekend in Philadelphia, and we happened to be staying at the same hotel, met in the lobby. I don't even think we exchanged names. We had a quick chat, and then he went his direction, I went mine. We were both waiting at ballet for our cars to get pulled up. And then a month later, happened to be at the same event. Didn't know we'd met each other a month earlier. Chatted, He asked for my number. I said, I'll give it to you later, and didn't. And then just by happenstance, out again a week later. And this time we recalled each other from the week before. And he said, can I get your number now? Gave it to him. And then when we started talking on the phone, that's when we realized we had met a whole month earlier in Philadelphia and didn't realize until that conversation we were the same people from the lobby. And I think I remembered like he was driving a black Maxima and I had a Infinity, and so we just kind of remember like, wait, are you the one with that? And then it all kind of was like, what are the chances that we met a month ago? And we didn't know that we had met a month ago. So it's one of the many, or it's one of the examples I like to think of as that I was not going to be able to escape him being part of my destiny. And if we hadn't exchanged numbers that third time, we would have interacted and crossed paths a fourth time. So that's how we officially met and exchanged numbers. And then, the roller coaster ride started from then.
That's so funny you said Destiny, because that was literally what I was thinking. And I definitely never, that's such a cool story. Like I never heard, especially that you met also outside the city. Like it wasn't even that you happen to both be like obviously like in New York, you'd be like, okay, well we could run into each other, but meeting that way. Yeah. And then I guess that you kind of answered it, but that's what I was thinking while I was listening to it, was part of you like, okay, like I'm a big sign person, like that I look for signs. I ask for signs when I feel like I'm uncertain about things. Mm-hmm. So you meeting, like you just said, that many times where you kind of like, okay, like this, did you feel at that time that this is a sign or this person is like meant to be in my life in some capacity?
I was 22, so okay. I was a very mature 22, I have to say, but I definitely wasn't crystallizing this is a special person and this is a special thing happening. The asking for a sign came later when it was like, should I marry this person? What am I doing? And so then it became kind of like, God, I need your help. But I can tell you at that time, I was like, no, I hadn't put it together. Even like, and I think you've said this before in another context, like when you're in it, you don't know you're in a story. Mm. You know what I mean? Like I didn't, and we went on a first date, and then I think the second date, he like, this is terrible, but I'm happy to share it. He's like, yeah, I was so young and ignorant, but like he I don't want to say it this way. He said, you're going to pay for dinner, right? Because you invited me out. And so there was like this confusion, I'll call it, around who was going to pay for our second date. And I paid. And then I was like, I'm never seeing this guy again. Like, this is like not cool. And so I think on the car ride home, he was like trying to give me the money back. And I was just like, you have no class. I'm like, I'm done with you. And so like, you don't know I didn't know I was in a story that was going to become like my person at that time. So there was no like, oh, how odd. Right. Yeah. So no, I didn't know it then, but obviously it makes for a good story now.
Yeah. It is funny you say that, because in the moment you're just living. Like you're just living. It's just another day. Like it's not what's going to now be the story that you like aspects of it tell your kids and all of that.
Yes, exactly. Now your father and I met? Yeah. No, I wasn't thinking that then. Mm.
So how far for your first marriage, how long were you guys dating for before you like got engaged, and all of that?
Yeah, so the first marriage was 9 years after dating. So I definitely wouldn't recommend. Yeah, it was long. It's fascinating to me that you and I have known each other 5 years and we've not had this depth of conversation. But, I guess I just assume because
we always talk about a high level of like years and stuff. So I don't think about like, I'm always like, they've been together forever, like, and I kind of in my brain wrap it all up.
Package deal. Yeah. Done.
So I don't like think about it in like the separate stages.
No. And I think I assume, like because you Steph had to give you some context of us before you met us. And then over time, before you meet somebody, you feel the person, and this is this person, this is how I know them, this is whatever. I just assumed he'd give you the backstory. But even Steph's version of the story comes through the prism of being
George.
George's friend through it. So there's probably parts of it that he doesn't even fully appreciate that happens and what, so we dated for 9 years. It definitely wasn't the plan. There was no strategy. We met 22. We're 90 days apart in age. And so we were both young and were like, no, neither of us was like looking for marriage or wanting marriage to happen anytime soon. One of the ways that I know we did grow together was we both went to school at the same time. So within a short period of time after dating, or starting to date, I realized I very much want to go to law school because it was a thing I knew I was going to do, but kind of put it off for a little bit. And so when I decided to go to school, he also, I guess, had the ambition or drive to want to go to business school. So we ended up going at the same time. So I went to law school, that took 3 years. He went to business school, that was 2 years. And then we kind of moved into what became our careers, him in real estate on business and me in real estate and law. And so there was all this like growing and kind of developing happening. And from my perspective, I wasn't looking for marriage at that time. I wasn't putting any pressure on him to be like, where is this going? And in my mind, I was just thinking, let me continue to do some of these important life things that I want for myself, like getting my career and some experience, getting my education career and some experience under my belt. Because I always envisioned wanting to take marriage seriously and then not knowing when kids would come into the equation, realizing prioritizing myself was going to have some tension, I'll say, around it. So I kind of was like, it was a bit more like, let me use this period of time to do some of my own development work that if I mix in other things is going to make this development part more challenging. So I didn't want to be a wife or a mother while I was like, let me get this education piece down, and pretty well understood that those first few years of being a junior associate are just grueling and very time constrained. So I wanted no parts of having the obligation of having a person to take care of, because I probably wasn't going to. And when I say take care of, I mean like, you want to be around, you want to watch a movie, you want to go on a date night, you want to be able to be like, are you hungry? Would you like some food? I was like, there would have been none of that if while I'm working a full-time job and going to school. So I was really glad to be in a space of, you're doing your education thing and career, I'm doing my thing, and we like each other, so we'll spend time and hang out, but it doesn't need to be a lot of weight of the next right now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we were. So 9 years before we got married.
I will say I feel like 9 years, and I was like, oh wow, like that's a long time. However, I do think at that stage in life, 9 years isn't as like even for me, when I said I had that one relationship that was really long, like you are doing so much like growing. And so I feel like if you had told me like at my age now, like I was with someone for 9, like, or like right now, I'm like, it's been 9 years and they're not like making that next step, it's very different than at that age and stage of life.
In the 20s, you just don't, there's so much that you don't know. And I remember when people would respond to my age, when I would say I'm 22 or 23, whatever, they would be like, oh, you're such a baby. And I'm like, no, I'm a full grown adult now. Like I couldn't wait till I could get to 21 and be like considered a respected adult. And then I realized, oh my God, there was so much I didn't know then. And again, to the first point I was making, I know now it was 9 years, but at the time I wasn't like tallying it up and being like, this has been kind of long. I don't know what's going on.
Clock's ticking. Like we need to do this next. Yeah.
I think I thought, marriage was the next step for starting a family and shifting into a different gear. And I wasn't ready for any of that yet. So, and I think it also helped that my peer group of friends from college and coworkers, no one was getting married. So I wasn't feeling like I was the last one or the only. It was like everybody's just growing, going to school, getting their careers underway. And so there was none of that wasn't happening.
It's so interesting you bring that up, because I was about to also ask that. It's interesting, I think, how, again, like who you were around. And I was going to say, like, you were listening to you, like, I know that you are very wise and like beyond your year, like you like mature for your age. Like I know that like Stacie, you went to school, college at what, 16? You started college?
Yeah,
Is that,
16.
yes. But like listen to you of like you were very self-aware and aware of you wanted those things down the road and that your career was going to be an important aspect of that or like require or demand a lot of your attention and
Time.
time so that like this is my focus right now. Like
Right.
yeah.
Like you're
But
not the
then
main act. Like this
right, yes.
relationship is not the main act. It was an important part of my life, but it wasn't the main act. And I'm grateful that I had that sense of self to know, like,
Yeah.
you're a part of
Especially with
my life.
that.
I'm not making you my whole world.
No, I love that. That I think that was such a big takeaway for me because just thinking about myself at that age, I too was like in college and knew that I needed a college like education and knew I wanted a good job, but I think I've joked about it like my main goal was finding my person already, I think around that time. So I love that like you kept like you're like this is my time to focus on me where I very much at that age was already not doing that. Like
Yeah.
I know like just thinking back at it and like thinking about even hopefully I won't have to worry about it with Zaria, but of like how important of like this is a time to just like you can date, do whatever, but like keep the main thing.
Travel,
And that's yes.
explore, do whatever you're passionate about. Yeah. And I don't remember anyone really telling me that, but I think to your point, my friend group, this is what we were doing. So it was kind of like if I had lived somewhere else and had a different group of friends and say at 25 everybody was getting married, I would have probably had a different sense of self and focus.
That's what I was thinking is that you guys were both New York, like in this, like already like in the city, which that tends to
Correct.
be one of the case where I moved to New York City from New York, but upstate New York, which is like a
Which is a
whole
different
different
world.
world, whole different
Yes.
world. So even though honestly it wasn't my friend group, but still like where I was raised was very
Yeah.
much everyone like you get married like super young. A lot of people from your same town marry each other, like same friend groups. All, like yeah. Anyway, it was just interesting hearing that because I think
No,
a
that's
lot of that
important.
has to do with yeah,
I think if you're doing any kind of like thinking and planning or thinking about like what you want for your children, even especially your girls, even your boys too, it's like thinking about the peer group that they're growing up around, especially when you get to those teenage into young adult years, because those people are going to have a lot of influence on your children. And so, as
yeah,
much as you're going to obviously have, hopefully, a ton of influence as parents, those people that they spend 10, 12, 14, sometimes even more hours a day with, that they're having conversations that would blow your mind that they're having, their thinking and what they're being inoculated with is going to impact and affect your children. So, that wasn't, I think, planned on my part as far as my parents thinking
right.
strategically. But also to your point, native New Yorker, I'm in New York, I work in the city. You know, I'm in a space of like I'm in Manhattan, and it's I'm just in the energy and a currency that career and growth is part of the culture that I'm in. So that helps me have that level of personal focus that if I was in maybe a different part of the country or the world, my focus would could have been completely different.
Yes, no,
And you and I
that's
would
what
not be sitting here having this conversation today. Yeah.
okay. So next question thought that just came to mind was this your first because you were obviously young when you guys met. Was this your first like significant relationship?
Really good question. No, but I will say it was the most, the person I felt like it was the first person I could see myself building with, which
Okay.
I thought was really cool. So boyfriend in high school, quasi boyfriend in college, and then this person being George, the first person that I could see like, oh, I could build with you. I could grow with you. There we have a level of connection and the way we see the world as being big and yet small in the way we want to move around it was like a big part of a level of connection. So I remember at 16 when I was maybe, I guess, a little bit younger because I graduated at 16 from high school. The guy I was dating in high school, I remember saying, I don't know if I can see us being able to be married. And I remember him thinking, who's thinking about your life partner? And like I had been, I don't want to say specifically trained or raised, but I grew up in church, and I happened to grow up in a church where we had like teen church. And so we would have these like conversations where they would really try to talk to you about life and kind of figuring it out and growing. And I just remember being taught that the purpose of dating was to find a life partner. And
No,
so
yeah.
at 16, I'm kind of like, you have certain values that don't line up with mine. And I don't think this is going to be able to go to, the long term. And I just remember him thinking I was so bizarre. And obviously I wasn't, to my point I made earlier, thinking about dating to lead to marriage at that time. I didn't want marriage anytime soon. But I was like, if I'm going to start
So the
spending,
intention. Yeah.
what am I doing? What am I doing? So I always had that kind of prism through which I was looking at the world, which I'm grateful for too. It didn't mean that I wouldn't date somebody, but I would start to kind of be like, if I started seeing a lot of red flags that started to make me feel like this doesn't have any kind of longevity future, then it would be like, I'm going to need to let this go, even if it was challenging or hard. I started to think more long-term, big picture, and I would always get to a point in prior relationships where I would be like, you've got to let this go to be able to like grieve or mourn whatever you had hoped this could have become, so you can make room for the next thing.
No,
Versus
absolutely.
like hang on to something too long when you knew it had no future. And while I never intended to date for 9 years, we dated for 9 years because I saw the promise of a future, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, that's a perfect segue because I was going to say,
Segue.
so 9 years, so the 9 years go by. So then how do you guys actually get to the point of like, okay, like it's time to get married?
So we had dated actually for 7 years and then broke up.
Okay.
And in the breaking up part, it was really, really hard. I remember I think I just was like, I'm not talking to you anymore. I've got to cut you off. This is not working. And in that cutting off, I remember I made a decision that I'm going to just like, I have to almost go cold turkey, because if we keep communicating, then you're going to pull me back in and I'm never going to be able to kind of extract myself from this relationship. So I didn't go into it with a set amount of time that I was going to not communicate, but like I blocked him, all the things to put up barriers and boundaries, which we talked about in another conversation. And it was so hard. So hard. Like I just remember feeling like I lost my best friend, that felt like I lost my leg. And it was like really, really challenging. And at that time, I kept myself as busy as I could. The hardest parts were the weekends, because that's when we would spend a lot of time. And at the time I was working for an entertainment company that had like events all the time. And so I was like, what event can I go to on the weekends? Booked and busy is what I did in that season to try to get through it. And I remember it had hit a 90 days of not communicating. And for whatever the reason, I said, you did good. You did 90 days. You should be able to call him now. And so I did. And I didn't pray about it. I didn't get any guidance on that. I remember later being like, that was a moment when you took control in a way that you shouldn't have. And so we started talking again. Next thing you know, we're dating again. And now we're going through therapy to try to kind of recover and like heal things that had been broken and damaged
Quick
from
pause. Hang on, why did you guys break up
Yeah.
during
So
that
I
time?
found out that he was cheating, and
Okay.
I was like, okay, this is like, there's no future for us. And so in the 90 days of being apart, I remember I called just to be like, hello. And we started talking, and he had just moved into a new apartment literally that day. He was moving in. He's like, this is so bizarre that you're calling me while I'm moving in. I, been hoping I could talk to you, and you had me blocked. And we started talking again, and a really good friend of both of ours, he was like a really, really good friend, suddenly passed away shortly after we started talking again. And that kind of helped bring us more, like, closer again. And now we're talking, and it was like a sudden, he was older than both of us, but he was like he called me baby sis. He was like my big brother. And so it was a huge shock because he just like suddenly died. That brought us back to kind of even greater connection. So then he's like, let's try to fix this, give me a chance. So he gets a therapist, he pays for the therapist, he makes all the appointments. And so now we're like in this kind of repair, heal. We can acknowledge there's really an authentic connection. And so we go through this process, I want to say probably about a year. And then a year into that, probably like now we're into year 8, between 8 and 9. And that's when it was like, okay, now that we've kind of maybe gotten past that and we think there's promise of a future here, now what? That was like the first time that I was like, okay, at this point now I'm in my early 30s. I still don't know that I want a husband, but I know that after getting some time away from it, now if I'm going to go back into it, now I all of a sudden feel like I need to know, is this going to be marriage or not? Because what I'm not going to do is give this another 7 years. Right? So there was a sense of, and then it was like, I want to get married. And then next thing you know, we were talking about marriage. And then it was like, let's get married now. And then I was like, wait, what do you mean marry now? And so then I thought, okay, let's plan for like a year from now. And then he was like, no, faster. And so next thing you know, it was like from the time we started talking about marriage to getting married was 6 months. So
oh my goodness. Okay.
that
So
felt fast because
yes.
it was like the venue, do all the things. And so that part happened quickly. Fast from when we started talking about it to when we did it. But obviously in the aggregate now, by the time we got married, it'd been 9 years. So
right.
that part wasn't fast. But yeah, so that's how that happened.
Okay. So you get married. And I know this is like the big wedding, right? This is the
big Park Avenue, Fifth Avenue in New York, rooftop, all the things. Beautiful, was in magazines, all the things.
Right. Okay. So you did it the like traditional way.
Huge, big way. Also, we did not live together before we got married. So
really traditional way all around. Okay. All right.
So we get married and then I move into the apartment he had moved into when I placed that call when we started talking again.
Okay. And then, so once you're married, how do we go from like, was there a time, because I know we already talked about it, that like your experience was it was hard from the beginning, but was there like that wedded bliss time after the fact at all? Or are we straight to like,
at all.
Why did I like, I made a wrong decision?
Literally when we got married, I think we were in the airport coming back from our honeymoon and a friend had called and wanted him to get involved with this movie he had made. And so when we came back and like got ourselves settled in our apartment, he had a full-time job, I had a full-time job, and now he had this new project that had him booked and busy and out of the house all the time. So now we're married and he's like coming home, changing, and then going to do something for this project. And it was like he was just never around. And so I never got like the whole honeymoon-ish kind of year one. We just like can't get enough of each other. We're spending all this time together. And it was a very tortured experience for me because I didn't feel like I could tell anybody that like this is nothing like what I thought it was going to be. And I'm really isolated and alone, and I had moved into his place, which was in New Jersey, and my family lived in New York. And so now I'm just kind of like in this apartment by myself, and I'm coming home every night after working like a crazy person because I'm a lawyer. And then it's like, why did I even, what am I remember being like, why did I get married? To be in an apartment out here by myself. If I wanted my own place, Jersey wasn't where I would have picked. So
right.
What was the point? And I remember like trying to have conversations about it, and it was just like, I'm trying to do this thing and I'm trying to be successful, and there just was like no ability to help him understand like this is not what being a newly married couple is even remotely supposed to look like. So that was a really dark, isolated time for me. And we just had this huge wedding. So where do you go to say like, okay, we just did this whole thing and expressed this undying love and commitment to each other forever, and I'm miserable.
Right.
Where do you go
No.
to have that conversation?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So
And
that
again,
was the
probably,
beginning of opening up a lot of me literally praying and saying, God, if you're not gonna help me, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Because like it was almost like, I don't know if I was fully thinking I gotta get divorced, but I was thinking this isn't gonna work, and this is definitely can't be the next forever for me, right? So like this needs a solution, and I don't know what to do. What were you gonna say?
I think I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, you had a question? Okay. Sorry, I was like,
No, it's okay.
at the same time.
But so, well, I think part of what I was thinking is, again, like what is a common theme that keeps coming up is like the importance of having like that community
Yes.
or even that like person that you can turn to, because it's when you get into these moments that feel so isolating, feels like you're the only one going through it,
And you're
and
not.
right, you're truly
Right.
not. But I think especially those moments where it's, again, like I just did this big thing, very forward, like external facing, that all these people saw. Like I can't, like almost like now I can't feel this way, or like a guilt, or
Correct.
like how's it gonna look if I do feel this
Correct.
way.
Correct.
So did you have? I know, obviously, thankfully, you have a very strong faith, but did you have anybody eventually that you were able to like turn to, or like how did you kind of start? What started
No.
no,
I was really isolated in that, which is
oh,
why one of the big and isolated by choice, meaning I had
right,
people that loved me and I could have started telling them, hey, this is actually not going smoothly at all. But I think part of why I didn't, a big part of it was because we had experienced the infidelity in year 7 and got back together, and my friends and family had kind of gone through that bumpiness with me on some level, probably more friends and family. There was a sense of kind of like, well, you knew you kind of had this like imperfect relationship. So now that it's imperfect, like what is there to really
would you?
talk about?
Yeah,
Yeah, what'd you expect?
like you're almost expecting them to like kind of throw it back in your face of like,
Yeah,
well, of course.
exactly. So they're correct. So then I was like, there's like, what am I going to say and who even wants to hear it? And there was a bit of like, you wanted to be the big girl who made this choice. Now you're going to have to sit in this and put your big girl pants on and deal with this. And I don't
But
think
you
that
felt
that
that way to yourself, right? Like you
correct.
were kind of like
Correct.
yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
The one of the things that I used to say to describe this was it was the first time that I couldn't control where my life was going up until this point. And when I say the first time, obviously as a kid I couldn't control, but once I had a sense of like agency where I could pick, so picking where I went to high school and picking where I went to college and then picking my first job and picking my first car and then picking trips I went on. There was all this choice. When going to law school, there was all this kind of, I was building and crafting, or so I thought, my life. And then I picked this partner, and now all of a sudden it's like, I want to go this way and I can't because he's pulling me this way. And now it's like, wait a minute, I don't have control over what comes next, because either this marriage is going to be successful because we both work at it, or I'm going to get divorced, which I won't have full control over because it'll be like the option left because I can't get the successful marriage that I want. And that was the first time I felt like, oh man, getting married is like this big thing where you give up some sense of like, I can control the destiny of where this car that is my life is going. Suddenly someone gets in and they grab the wheel, and next thing you know, you're weaving and bobbing around the road in a way where you used to be able to just kind of go straight or put a signal on and make a left. And there was all this control, and suddenly I felt like I'd given up control, which for a type A control freak in some regards was like super disorienting. And then you add to that feeling like I can't talk about it. It
Yeah,
was
no, that's
it was a slow, painful, torturous season.
yeah.
He's like, I can imagine that. Yeah,
I can,
it
yeah.
was
So I'm like, I very much can imagine it.
connect with that. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was bad.
Okay. So at what point, would you say at this time, I don't like using the word regret, but like at this time,
Oh
would you
no,
say
no,
like at
that's a
what
good
point
word.
you regretted it? Okay. And then
Yeah.
you felt like you had a lack of a choice. At what was, because I know like you obviously have you were raised in church, like you had strong thoughts and views on marriage. Did this A, change your view on marriage, and B, to you, was divorce always an option on the table, or did it like at some point become an option to you?
So I don't think I was thinking divorce right up front. I think I was planning to try to figure out how I was going to solve this, but I was super frustrated that I couldn't come up with solutions. And like coming up with solutions is almost like superpower for me. So the fact that I couldn't use my superpower the way that I had worked for me up until that point was also really frustrating. And it was the beginning of what I would call a breaking process that God was allowing to occur because up until that point, really thought I was orchestrating my
Everything
life.
in your
And
life.
yeah, I was orchestrating it. And I was being guided and led, but I wasn't kind of aware or acknowledging that I was being guided and led. And this process was the breaking that was necessary for me to be rebuilt into a person who was able to say, okay, you really are Lord. Like, you are Lord, and I am choosing to be led by you, and I will consult with you, ask, pray, wait, and go as you direct, not because I don't have the ability to choose, but because I want the plan you have for me better than what I can come up with on my own. Basically, to date, I've been doing a pretty good job picking, but I recognized that I had maxed out at kind of what my human understanding could do, and now I had gotten to where I was like, I'm gonna need some help. And then once I realized how badly almost I had stepped into it. You kind of make one of these big mistakes and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not as good as I thought I was, and I'm gonna need to like eat a bit of humble pie and realize like there's bigger and greater, and I really shouldn't be like just wheeling it. That's kind of that's what I ended up growing into, like getting to that conclusion. But yeah, so it was what I call kind of falling apart behind the scenes. I was silently suffering, really unhappy, didn't know what to do. Spent a lot of time. I remember times being like literally on the floor and praying and saying, God, if you don't show up, I'm not going to make it. Real desperation and just waiting. I don't know why I knew to keep waiting, but I knew you have to show up. I don't know when, and I don't understand why it's taking so long to get an answer. So I felt like months and months and months of silence. But I didn't stop begging and I didn't stop asking. And I remember, I'm a big listener, like now it's podcasts, but back then it was YouTube videos or whatever. So I was listening to teaching and preaching and things that were kind of trying to help me not lose my mind, but I was definitely in a place of like, I'm gonna need you to show up with some type of guidance and direction. And eventually what I got was which was not what I was looking for, the evidence that he was cheating. And then my whole world just was like, oh, you really stepped in it, Stace. Because it's almost like you didn't learn your lesson at year 7 and now here you are, and I guess year 10 if I'm counting from the beginning, and you're where you could have escaped before, now you're in it, and however you come out of this, you ain't gonna be able to do this privately and quietly. Hi, so we are interrupting what you were just listening to because this was the most organic spot we could find to pause to give us like a wrap up on part 1 and come back for part 2. So we hope you are feeling like, oh man, why'd they stop? So that you could come back next week and listen to the second part of the conversation where Eden gets me to open up and continue to share details of my journey. I don't know I guess I should give it a name at some point. But stay tuned because Eden and I both become vulnerable about the details and nuances of our story. So see you next week. Remember to unlock your queen
And unleash her dreams.